In the late 1800s, a new model of bicycle was introduced, capable of going much faster than older models, and with increased shock absorption, it quickly took the world by storm. It did have the minor problem that crashes in it were much more likely to cause traumatic head injury, but this was considered a small price to pay for the increased speed. This bike was known as the penny farthing. Today, it's remembered for its cartoonishly large front wheel, but at the time it was considered a significant advancement in the ability of going fast. A few weeks ago, playing around in The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, I came up with my own model of vehicle, which it turns out relied on exactly the same principles of physics as the penny farthing to get Link going as fast as possible. So, today, I would like to share with you everything that went into this design so you can understand how it works and come up with your own fun vehicles. So, let's go to the game. The fundamental component of the penny farthing is the lever. Now, you might not think of that. When you look at a bike, where's the lever? Well, the lever, in fact, is the wheel, or more precisely speaking, the pedals relative to the wheel. But I'll get back to showing you that in a bit. Let's look at levers in their most basic form. So, right here in the game, I've set up a couple of devices that we can use as levers. Using wagon wheels, I've set up boards that can freely rotate around an axis, one that rotates around a vertical axis, and one that rotates around a horizontal axis. This one comes with a stabilizer for easily setting things up and comparing forces. So I'll be starting out with this lever. Now, levers are normally classified into one of a few different types. Now, I don't personally care for the normal classification of levers, so I'll be using my own classification, but just so you can communicate with others, let's go over what the traditional classes of levers are. So, class 1 is a lever where you've got a force down on one side, trying to move something up on the other side. So in this case, let's say the applied force is the sled I have on the right, and the load, that is the work we're trying to do, is a sled on the left. So right now the stabilizer's keeping things as they are. So just take a moment to think, what is likely to happen as soon as I turn the stabilizer off? And then, experiment is always key in the end, so let's try it and see. So, the load, or the effort on the right, so effort is the force we initially apply to the lever, and the load is what we want to do with that. So in this case, the effort won out, pushed down the lever, and was able to overcome the force of gravity on the load to push it up. Now let's modify things. We're still going to use the same weight, but we're just going to change where the weight is. So instead of putting it way out there, I'll bring it in close to the center. So what's going to happen this time? We have the same weight on each side, we've just changed where the weight is. Okay, now let's test. Same weight, but this time it tilts to the left. The effort wasn't enough to overcome the force of gravity on the load. So, what's going on here? Well, let's talk about the basics of this type of lever first. So, this is called a class 1 lever. A class 1 lever is one where the effort and load are on different sides. So, effort is the force you intend to apply, load is the work you want to do. So, we're pretending here our goal is to move the sled on the left up. Or we could even put Link there. Our goal is to bring Link up. So a class 1 lever is the way I prefer to describe levers. I would call this a force redirection lever. the goal of a lever like this is to take a force, in this case, the force of gravity on the sled on the right, and this force is always going down, but the lever redirects that force to go up. So the purpose of this lever is to redirect the force from this gravity on the sled going down to force on the sled and link going up. Now, how exactly this works depends a bit on how far out this sled is. But before getting into those details, I want to talk a bit about Class 2 and Class 3 levers. And for this, I'm actually going to modify this lever that works on a vertical axis, and I'm going to put the fulcrum close to the edge. Now, yeah, okay, so it's not quite dragging on the floor here. And now, since we can't have gravity going horizontally, I'll be using a fan to apply the force. And let's find something we want to move with it. Just something random. I'll just take a random wagon wheel. Let's say our goal with this lever is to move this wagon wheel. Now, with the fulcrum on one side, there are two possible ways we can arrange the effort. Remember, the fan is the force we're directly applying, and the load. The load is what we want to work on. So in this case, I'm using the wagon wheel as the load. We can put the effort at the outside of the lever and the load in the center, or somewhere between the two. It doesn't have to be the exact center. I'll just put it right there. And if we do this, we get what's called a Class 2 lever traditionally. Oh, it looks like it's dragging against the ground there. I'll have to set this up a bit differently so it doesn't drag quite as much. But yeah, that's the basic principle. It's just a little bit out of balance there. Yeah, I'm gonna have to put this more or less centrally, not explode from lightning. So the next type of lever we want to look at is a Class 2 lever. So for this, we're going to change what is acting as our effort and our load. So our load is just going to be this wagon wheel. I just picked up something that this is what we want to move. It's going to be attached to our lever, which is this plank, and our effort is going to be supplied by the fan, since with the horizontal lever, we can't use gravity to operate on something to cause a force around it. So, now, obviously in this case, we only have force going in one direction as we turn the fan on. So it's going to rotate in that direction. Absolutely no surprise there. Now, the reason this is called a Class 2 lever is specifically because of the arrangement of the load and the effort. For a Class 2 lever, the load goes between the effort and the fulcrum. Now, I don't like calling this a Class 2 lever because it doesn't have any intuitive meaning. You can't just listen to Class 2 and say, this is a lever that does X. So, as with the Class 1 over here, I call this a force redirection error lever. I'm going to call the Class 2 lever a force amplification lever. The reason for this is that having the load between the effort and the fulcrum has the result that the force we apply to it is actually greater than the force that comes out of the effort. Now, you can see this actually if we go back to our horizontal lever. So we've got two sleds on this lever. On the right, we've got one far away, and on the left, we've got one that's a bit closer. And when we let the lever go, the one on the right wins out. It's able to apply effectively more force going down than the one on the left. But over here, I'm saying that having the fan on the outside will cause more force on something a bit in the center. Well, this is actually the same as taking the load off of here and putting it on the opposite side. And here, I'm putting it on the back so we can see it's still going in the same direction around that. It still resists turning in the same way, but since it's closer in, it doesn't have as much of an overall impact on it. And the specific term for that, we call that torque. So what's going on with the lever basically is that when something is farther out, it causes more torque on the lever than something close in. And this means that something farther out will win in a balance of forces between the two. Or another way of looking at it is if you want to apply more force to something, like let's say, for instance, instead of wanting to lift one sled, we want to lift 2 sleds. Let's take 2 sleds here, and we can use our force redirection lever as also a force amplification lever. This is another reason I don't like the traditional classification of levers, as really 3 classes isn't enough, as redirection levers can also be used to amplify force. So if you want to lift up 2 sleds, all you have to do is put them really close to the center here and the one really far out, let the lever go, and one sled pushing down is able to lift up 2 sleds. So right here, this is already acting as a force amplification lever and a force redirection lever. It's still technically a class 1, but if we wanted this to be a class 2 lever, we could set them up so that the load that we want to move is between the effort and the fulcrum. And in fact, let me do that with fans here. So we've got one fan at the outside, and let's put 2 fans facing the opposite direction. I demonstrated in a previous episode that fans can blow through each other and stack the force. Now, if I put them right in the center, it'll balance out perfectly. So I'm going to put them just a bit off to the side. Let me take out another fan here. And we'll take off the wagon wheel for simplicity, since we don't really care about that. So now we've got all of the forces acting on the same side of the board. We've got one that, if we look down, wants it to go counterclockwise, and we've got 2 that want it to go clockwise. There's more force going clockwise than counterclockwise, but if we turn it on, it's actually the counterclockwise force that wins out. And this is because this is how levers work. This is a class 2 lever, which I'd call a force amplification lever, where we're assuming our effort here is this one fan and our load is those 2 fans, which I've just set up to cause force so we can see that we're actually amplifying the force here. So if you've got a task you need to do where you want to apply more force, you can use a class 2 lever. A classic everyday example of this is a screwdriver. When you want to tighten a screw, you have to apply a lot of force to it. But to aid in that, the handle of the screwdriver is thicker than the screw itself. So when you apply the force at a greater distance from the point of rotation, you get extra force applied to the screw itself. And if you have ever used a horizontal screwdriver, which is one where the handle turns 90 degrees and gets the handle out even farther, you will remember that that is even easier to turn. That's because with the handle out even farther, you're amplifying the force even more. So finally, let's go to the 3rd class of lever. Traditionally, this is a class 3 lever. So a class 3 lever has the force as the effort close to the fulcrum and the load far out. So in this case, the force is not going to win out, so I'll take those fans off, we won't be using them, and our load will be this wagon wheel again. So a class 3 lever, you have the force between the fulcrum and the load. And when you turn it on, yeah, obviously there's effort only in one direction, so it goes in that direction. But our goal here isn't to amplify the force. In fact, we're doing the opposite. We're decreasing the force. The goal of a class 3 lever is to increase the speed of what's going on at the load. So we aren't trying to apply more force to the load, we're trying to apply more speed to it. Or sometimes it's just more distance covered, but usually it's more speed. So one example of this, you can think of a golf club or baseball bat, some item that you will hold close to you, apply force a bit out, and then swing, and then the tip of it will be going a lot faster than where you swing it. Or, if you want to go back to one of my previous episodes, this is basically how a trebuchet works, except trebuchet is also a force redirection lever, but it applies the force close in to the fulcrum in order to get a lot of speed far out from the fulcrum. Now, as I said before, I don't like the traditional classes of levers, as doing this is equivalent to having the force on the opposite side of the fulcrum facing the opposite direction. You get the same result. Yeah, it spins fast just the same. The way I like to classify it is any lever may be a force redirection lever if the effort and load are on opposite sides, and it might be force neutral if the effort and load are the same distance out, or it might be force amplification if the effort is farther out so it can apply more force to the load, or it might be speed amplification if the effort is closer in so it can give more speed to the load. So those are the three types of levers, and at this point you might be wondering, why am I talking about this, and what does it have to do with bicycles? Well, let's go back to the image of the penny farthing bicycle. So, how does everything I just talked about relate to a bicycle? Well, the bicycle wheel is actually just a type 3 lever. So let's go over all the key points in it. First, at the center, you have the axle. This is the fulcrum of a lever. Then you have the pedals. This is where you're applying effort to it. And now, on a modern bicycle, your instincts will tell you that the wheel isn't directly connected to the pedal because we're so used to modern bicycles that have gears. But way back when this was invented, it predated using gears. So the wheel rotated at exactly the same speed as the pedals. So this is all firmly fixed. And so the wheel here is basically the load of a lever. It's what we ultimately want to move. And so you can imagine that a spoke going through the axle is just a lever. You've got the effort on the middle between the axle and load, and that corresponds to a class 3 or speed amplification lever. So going through what we've done before, this shows that you can apply a little bit of speed at the center and get a lot out. Now, let's go through that with just a few more details in case you aren't convinced. So let's imagine that you can rotate the pedals under the power of your own feet at a rate of 1 revolution per second. And let's throw out some numbers here. Let's say the radius at the pedals is 10 centimeters. And the radius to the wheel is 50 centimeters. So if you want to get the speed of your feet going around the pedals, what you can do to get the speed, we use V for velocity here. So velocity of the pedals equals the rate of rotation. So 1 revolution per second. Now, a revolution is technically unitless, so you'll see this disappearing in later steps of the equation. Then you multiply it by the radius at the pedals, so 10 centimeters, and then times 2 pi to convert the radius to the circumference. So basically, you're going the circumference in distance every second. So putting through all of that math, you get 2 pi times 10 centimeters per second, or just 20 pi centimeters per second, which I'll just say is roughly 63 centimeters per second. So that's how fast your feet can go. So if you didn't have a lever to assist you, that would be your speed limit. But we are using a lever, and specifically a speed amplification lever, so we can do better than that. So when we calculate the speed of the wheel, we go through the same calculations, we just have a bigger radius. So we have 50 centimeters in here instead of 10. And so when we go all through, we get a final speed of about 314 centimeters per second. A bit of rounding on each of these due to pi. So essentially, we're going 5 times as fast using this lever as we could just using our own feet. So you can see why this bicycle took off. All of a sudden, you're able to amplify the speed caused by your own feet to go about 5 times as fast, depending a bit on the specific design of the bike. The bigger the wheel relative to the pedals, the faster you could go. Now, there was a trade-off to this. The trade-off is in force. Now, let's just say, imagine our traditional lever. We've got a fulcrum there, which is usually drawn as a triangle. Then we've got a long arm, and we're applying effort here to move a load way over here. But a load is just another force resisting it. So although we've got a class 3 lever here, a speed amplification with force in the middle, the load is going to resist motion. So we can also say that this is really the same thing as having force coming down where the load is, which is resisting the effort, which now we're flipping and we're saying this is a pseudo load pressing up. And if you look at it this way, with the effort on the outside, we're back to a force amplification lever. So what all of this means is that in order to go forward, we have to apply force. And when we're moving the bike forwards, essentially what we're doing is we're applying force right where the wheel hits the ground. We apply force backwards against the ground, which by Newton's third law, every force has an opposite force. Or to put it in more relatable terms, if you're patting a cat, the cat pushes back into your hand and pats you back. So the ground pushes the bike forwards. But the trade-off to a lever is if you want to amplify the speed, you lose out on force. So if we want to apply force of 1 Newton, Newton is just standard unit for force, doesn't matter right now what it is, then in order to apply a force of 1 Newton on the ground, if that's 5 times as far away, the force you apply on the pedal is going to have to be 5 newtons. So there is a trade-off, but the way the human body works, and particularly the leg muscles, since the legs are so used to holding you up, if you're sitting down and your legs don't have to hold you up, they've got a lot of extra force they can apply. So it's very easy for the human legs to apply extra force, much more so than it is for them to apply extra speed. So this is a good trade-off. you can apply more force, but you can't apply more speed. So you use a lever to turn that excess force into extra speed, and you can go faster. Now, there is one other problem, and that problem is safety. Let's say you're going along on a bike, and uh-oh, there's a big rock in the way. You hit the rock, and then you're sitting up here, right on top of the wheel. There's not really much in front of you to prevent you from falling. So you've got a big open space that isn't stopped from falling. The bike stops, you haven't stopped, you're going fast. That was your goal. You wanted to go fast. And now all of a sudden, no seatbelt, you go flying off, tumbling over, and hit your head on the ground. So this is the other problem with penny farthings, is they had very poor safety. Now, then as of now, people would prioritize safety or prioritize fun over safety. Now it's not as bad, since the basic design of bikes doesn't cause you to tumble forward anywhere near as easily. But we still see now people like to go without helmets, which a helmet is just safer, even if it's less fun. But back then, you were even at even more of a risk of hitting your head. So it's a problem, but people were willing to make that trade-off. And in Tears of the Kingdom, I too am willing to make that trade-off and build a horrendously unsafe penny farthing-like bicycle, or rather unicycle, for the sake of fun speed over safety. So let's go back to the game. So on previous episodes, you saw me construct a big wheel. Well, I have improved the big wheel, and I have improved it by adding spikes. If you want to see how to get spikes, hold on till the end of the episode, and I'll go over a lot of other details about this build to show you how you can build your own. But basically, these spikes are bought off the Yiga and then duplicated with auto build. So this wheel, before we start driving it, let's look at it for a bit. So I'm gonna leave it right there while I write on screen a little. So let's look at the various parts of this. So first of all, at the center of it, we've got one quote-unquote big wheel. It doesn't look very big in comparison, but this is what it's called in-game. And this is where the effort is initially applied. This wheel is able to turn on its own axis and rotates at a maximum speed that allows it to travel at about 10 map units per second. So it's going to rotate this way, going forward at 10 map units per second. But then each of these legs that comes out extends the radius. So if this radius is 1 just to the edge of the wheel, the full radius is something like 5. And this results in us going, say, 5 times as fast. Now, of course, there is the force trade-off before, so it applies a force back, and if this force back is 5, then the force it actually applies on the ground is only going to be 1. So this is one of the reasons I've introduced spikes to the design, is they can anchor into the ground much better than the old top sides of carts. So this gives us better traction when getting up to speed, so we don't slip off the ground as much. It doesn't get around the fundamental limitation that there's a maximum amount of sideways force we can apply to get going, but it does keep us from slipping, which helps a lot. It also causes more damage to any enemies that we might run over while traveling. So here we have, this is effectively the same principles as the penny farthing, except instead of pedals, we've got a rotating big wheel. And instead of a wheel made of aluminum, tin, or whatever metal they had on hand, we've got a wheel made of Yiga spikes. We've got our steering stick, and we've got a stabilizer here, which helps keep us upright, similar to how with the penny farthing, it had that tiny wheel at the back to stabilize. So we've got all of the components of a penny farthing bicycle here. So, let's take our bicycle for a ride. Now, as with the penny farthing, the most difficult part of riding this bicycle is getting onto it. So, in-game, the best way to do that is hold it with Ultra Hand, hold it still for a bit, let go, use recall to hold it in place, and then we ascend into the steering stick, cancel recall, turn it on, and take it for a ride, and get going much faster than the big wheel on its own could do. Albeit, steering is a bit of an issue, safety is a bit of an issue, we hit our heads, but we had a lot of fun going fast, didn't we? Well, I will leave you after this with a couple better clips of me riding the bicycle. I also tried attacking a Hinox with it, and make a guess. How damaging is it? Let's do it in comparison to the unfused Master Sword. The wheel going at full speed, how many swipes of the unfused Master Sword is that equivalent to? For in-game numbers, the unfused swords is about 30 points of damage. It doesn't show you that, but that's what it is. So, how many swipes of Master Sword is equal to the giant wheel attacking an enemy? Alright, I'll leave you to that, and be back afterwards for some roundup tips to help you in your own building. Alright, welcome back everyone. So, to give you tips, first I am going to show you directly where you can buy the Yiga spikes. So, you can try finding them in the depths if you want, or you can buy them from the Yiga hideout. So, the front entrance to the Yiga hideout is around here. Probably the easiest way to get there is going to the Gerudo Highland Skyview Tower. It's going to be a bit chilly around here, so I want to briefly put on some freeze-resistant clothes. But once we get to the Yiga hideout, we'll need to switch for a Yiga clan outfit. Alright, please let us in, and do not examine the blonde hair poking out of my mask too closely. Thank you for welcoming me, a person who is absolutely not Link, into your hideout. So, right here, over on the left, you find someone with their beloved spikes, and we'll just take these. Oh, come on. Don't you know main character priv? I am not the main character of this game. The main character of this game is Link, who is not me. Yeah, so, okay, no main character privilege. Okay, maybe we can work out a deal. Okay, you love your spikes. Good for you. Yes, I'm spike shopping. Oh, you just restocked. Maybe I can go raid your stockpile, that might be easier. But, I'm here. 100 rupees. Fine. Okay, are these mine now? Can I take them? Good. Now, I feel that 100 rupees was a bit expensive, so you and I are going to have a talking to. Okay? Now, I'm going to duplicate these as I wish, and if you have anything to say about that, yeah, that's going to be you. Okay. So, we've got our spikes. And if we want to duplicate them, just take out really any material. Let's use an apple here. Fuse the apple to them. Really anywhere, but I put it in the edge so that we can work with it where we want. And then it will be stored in your auto build history. So, If we go over here, so we're out of range of that, when we want to duplicate the spikes, we take out an apple, go to auto build, make it, and we get a Zonai copy of the spikes. Now, one thing to be careful of here is if you remove the apple right away, the spikes vanish. Zonai copies do not, at least normally, do not stay once they're out on their own. They have to be attached to at least one other thing. So, if you want to keep them around, you have to incorporate them into your build first. So, for now, I'm just going to demonstrate attaching one spike to another. So, if you attach them up like that, now you can freely take the apples, and we just have some spikes that we can do as we please with. No, I will not be careful. You're overcharging me for spikes here. I will not be careful at these prices. So, that's how we get spikes. You can save that to your auto build history favorite, and then whenever you want more, take out an apple, auto build it, fuse it to your design, and then you can take back the apple. Doesn't even cost you an apple overall, you just need to use the 3 Zonite to build the spikes. Alright, next component for the big wheel, you might have noticed the spokes I used. Now, those are a glitch component, which you can find down in the depths, specifically in the right leg depot. So the right leg depot you can get to easiest from this light route, the Muokwij light route near the Construct Factory. On the surface, that's near the Poplar Foothills Skyview Tower, right east of Lake Hylia. So, let me go, I'll show you how to get those railings, which are what we use for the spokes of the wheel. Now, these are a glitched component. They might be taken away in a future patch. If they are, you can use wooden posts, which are heavier and not as long, but they do work for building a giant spiky wheel. So once you've teleported here, you'll want to head northeast to this little raised platform up here. And then from here, grab one of the rockets, attach it to the hoverstone, make sure it's not below anything. So yeah, over here, is that good? We're still a bit covered. Let's go back a little bit, hop on, and give it a whack. Don't take a whack. Give it a whack. The auto aiming is screwing with me here. There we go. And fly up. Then once you're close enough, you'll want to ascend, which I am not close enough. Okay, so you have to boost yourself up first. So what we're gonna do, put the hoverstone up on top there, attach the rocket to it up there, then we'll climb up. We will climb up. We will climb up. There we go, Link. Okay. And we can recall to put it up a bit higher. And we've already lost the rocket. Okay, give me a moment here. We will ignore the hoverstone, attach the rocket to our shield, shield rocket up, and then remember that we actually have to ascend through, and we actually do need the hoverstone. Okay, now we are close enough to ascend through. Now, right inside this depot, you'll see on your left a little fan elevator, which in this case, the railing is broken. It can't actually get up very high. But we don't care about the elevator itself, so take off these fans so they don't get in the way. And look at this left railing. This is what we're going to be using for the spokes of our wheel. Now, if you just attach something to it, the game won't store it in your auto-build history. However, if you break it off and then attach something to it, it will. But breaking it up is the tricky part. It won't allow you to just jiggle it off like other things. You need to actually break it somehow. So there are two ways to do this. One, attach 6 rockets to the top of it, pointing forward, or the cheaper way, using 2 stabilizers. This is a bit more finicky. To do this, you want to attach the flatheads of the stabilizers to the side of the railing. Do not attach them to the top like this. Attach them to the side. Get them as far up as possible so they're attached to the side and overhanging. And it does require 2 to cause enough force. And we'll put them like that. Activate them. And it tears off the railing. Now, it won't be added to auto-build history just yet, but as soon as you attach anything else to it, it will be. So if we just reattach the stabilizer, it's now in auto-build history. But a stabilizer isn't the most useful thing, so we'll just detach those, take out an apple again, attach it to the railing, and we can easily duplicate it from auto-build history later. So, this just creates the same one, but we can also create a duplicate of it. Now, this material is glitched since Nintendo didn't expect it to be used this way. And what this means is, for one thing, it, unlike most other things, doesn't disappear if detached from everything else. For another thing, it is ridiculously light. It's like a giant feather. It's also indestructible for how light it is. And it's longer than the wooden posts and lighter, so it is an ideal component for the spokes of our wheel. And it's just weird how light it is. It just falls like a feather. So, those are the 2 exotic components we use for our wheels. If in the future Nintendo patches it out so you can't tear off this railing or use it in your builds, wooden posts will work. You can find a ton of those right north of Lookout Landing. There are plenty in the building sites around here. So that's all you need to build the wheel. The rest is just assembling it. Thank you everyone again for watching. I hope you've all enjoyed this. And I look forward to seeing what creative things you come up with in the future. See you all again. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and click the bell to be sure you get notifications of new uploads. See you again soon.